Hello, this is George Sandman. I'm the founder and CEO of Growth Drive. And Growth Drive is a system used by business advisors to drive client profits, growth, and value. Now, we're also a community. Every week we get together to talk about all things business advisor, everything clients, cases, things we're seeing out in the world. Now, tune in here to this podcast, and you can join the conversation by scanning this QR code, passcode 867-5309. Jump into the conversation. Everyone's welcome. We're looking forward to having you. So here we go. On with the show.
We don't have the George this morning, so
He must be on the phone with Mike. Those two guys get going.
Just
Right.
check-in call. And I had a really well structured introductory meeting yesterday with an owner at through referral of a CPA firm here in town, and it was just like perfect setup where the owner had kind of just frustrated enough that he can't grow the business. He's doing what, between 28 to 32 million, year after year, can't quite get it beyond that. And it was just one of those days where he immediately sent us a link to his email, and we got an appointment Friday. Very optimistic, but knock on wood. But it was through a long effort of working that CPA, and now we kind of break that seal, so to speak. I think we'll get more and more referrals from him and other CPAs that see what we can do for their owners, especially the larger ones, which I think they're very nervous about the account because it brings in so much revenue for them. So once you get through that, my belief is that you kind of have a good steady stream of referrals, but getting that first olive out of the jar is extremely painful.
So is it a client of the CPA firm that
Yes.
was stuck at plateaued, or was it the CPA
Yeah.
firm itself that was plateaued?
Client of
The interesting part, I think, for everybody, and probably Eric would, and that would be really interested. It's been what, 8 months or 9 months till we got to this point.
Right.
And we've had umpteen meetings in between, never with the client, but just with the referral source, to help him to get understanding completely the types of services that we can deliver to one of his clients. And he identified he's got 2 clients that have a lot of the issues that we've talked about that we work on and can help. I guess we have to work on our delivery and give them much better creativity on what we do in a picture and some handouts that are simplified, that they grasp that what we do is we dig into the detail and highlight the process and systems that aren't in place, existing, or are malfunctioning, and that the accounting firm has no idea and doesn't even want to address. I mean, as long as the financial statements come off the computer and they can get them to do the tax returns, and they can do periodic review of the account for bank loans or anything, the client's just a wonderful client and they love them. And I think that's one of the things that I think Joe and I have learned, that this thing is we've kind of continually revised, enhanced, and we haven't found the perfect picture tool yet, but we're working on several options. But I think that one that Joe hit on that really resonated well with the owner yesterday was, you grow a curve and you get going really well and you get up to a certain volume. And then once you hit that volume, all of a sudden you start to lose momentum and you start to go down, and you need to find the thing that's going to reinvent the company to get it to take off onto a new growth curve. And he's saying frustration, salespeople that are sitting waiting for the phone to ring to take an order because he's got them on too big of a salary. And I said, I can equate that to my son who has a recruiting business. And the beauty of the recruiting business is got them all on $1,000 a year salary. So if you don't hunt, you don't eat. And I think that's the easiest way to identify it when you have businesses like that that have to be driven by continually re-engaging and finding the types of clients and customers that keep bringing you the volume that you need to be financially earning and contributing well to the business.
That's helpful. What else did you guys share over the last umpteen months in meetings that you think helped to break this CPA firm through to be an active referral partner?
I think Joe mentioned was that we can look at some of the details in the accounts and see when an account is out of alignment with what it should be. And so if you do perform it and compare it to some standard industry performance data, where I can pull some industry data from my Pratt stats and some of my valuation area, where I can get some norm for different size companies and pull it. Really insightful because it gives us and shows the accounting firm aspects of the business that might need to be looked at in depth. And so when they then meet with the client, they ask the client about that topic. Say, do you feel like that thing is under control or it's not under control? Or do you perceive that it's growing faster? And what do you think is the best solution? The biggest category, he said, is in the past 2 years, cost of labor has gone up $2 million each year. Yet margin is constantly eating and getting eroded. Yet he's got a sales force of 8 people that he said are working at the effectiveness of 1 3/4 of a person. And I said, I can equate that because when I was at ChemLawn and we were selling maintenance, all we were doing was putting product on commercial properties. I mean, we didn't edge, we didn't go into do any of that kind of extra services like you see most landscapers now doing. All we did was put fertilizer and weed control on the grass and in for shrubs. So we were very narrowly focused. Well, the problem was we left all the best revenue where you needed more labor, but lower quality of labor, where you didn't have to have licenses and skills to identify challenges.
Hey, Joe, have you guys ran through the entire growth drive system with the CPA firm? Level 1, level 2, and actually let them play with the system at all?
You want to answer that, Ed?
I say the only thing we've done is we've let them see the clarity level. We haven't taken them past clarity. We've talked about that the subsequent questions will be far more comprehensive and far more in depth. But until you get past clarity, there is no basis to justify sharing with them the next level until they want to do it on a client. And so we're going to take and get the partner at this firm to go and work with us as we go and do it on this client, because I think he's going to be shocked at the revelation. I mean, when you're doing 30 some million and we've got to go through the 24 questions and then take them through the next level after that. And Joe had a perfect scenario because he said he's got one of those crazy organizations where he's the vision, he's the implementer, and then he oversees everybody. And so he only works 6 or 7 days a week at $38 million, and he was sharing. He was driving a tractor trailer the one weekend from place to place because they didn't have a guy to drive the tractor trailer. So you could have had a $20 an hour driver on a tractor trailer, and here's he doing that. And so not getting an effective leadership team that's getting trained and directed is obviously an issue. And so the team down directly operating the people, because he's got the problem. He's got 25 sites and he's trying to oversee things from corporate without having an accountability factor with somebody out there that can oversee the sites.
Yeah.
And I can equate that when I had the southern part of the US, I had 36 branches, but I had 3 regional managers whose job was to get into each site and to make sure things were running smoothly. And we had daily KPIs that told us how we were doing. I asked the question, what kind of KPIs do you get? That was kind of a dead air space, shall I say? You know, his comment was, well, I know the numbers that they should be. That wasn't the question. The question is, do you get enough information to tell you, is the operation functioning at the efficiency and the level that you believe it can be functioning at?
Right.
And I think that that was an acknowledgement. The partner at the accounting firm said, well, that's one of the biggest challenges. He's telling me he's trying to do all these things. Here he is he's 59 or 60 years old, and he's trying to pull this whole truck by himself, and he doesn't have any, shall I say, extra horses. He's trying to be all 6 horses on the Bush team there, and he's trying to play 6 Clydesdales, and he's only a one-person Clydesdale. Something's going to always not work.
Yeah.
Good morning, Teresa.
Morning.
Yeah, he's gonna get on his $2 million jet and fly down to Georgia to visit one of the plants, and so he's got the wherewithal and the toys. It's just interesting perspective.
You know, it hasn't started hurting bad enough yet. Once it starts to hurt bad enough, he'll do something.
Well, that's what I think has created the demand for us to come in and start to dissect what's going on. The nice thing is, just with the graph, the pictorial that Joe showed on the growth curve, and when you start hitting you've hit a plateau and then you're starting to lose ground, profitability goes, but the revenue stays. That starts to create a burning issue. That was absolutely, when we showed that yesterday, it was right on target with him, because it happens to any size organization. I mean, it could be a $3 million business that gets going fantastic. They hit 3 million, and then for the next 2 years they're at 3 million, but the profit margin goes from 18% down to 6%.
Yeah.
And they can't figure out what's going wrong.
You know, growth is not cheap.
Yeah. So from a management style, is his problem that he doesn't know how to delegate or doesn't trust people? Is he a control freak? What's keeping him from actually building a team? Is he afraid to hire people that are smart and that he won't be able to keep up with them? What's the thing that's keeping him from scaling the people side of his business?
Joe, what did you pick up at it?
I don't know that we know that.
I didn't hear anything on that.
But what's kind of fun though, you think about teaching that S curve, and then you always want to have a conversation, tell a history of the company, but telling me a history of the company related to the S curve, right? So when it was founded, it was here, right? And at some point it started to fade off, and you had to reinvent. So this book that we are referring to,
The reinventing,
is called How to Thrive in Chaos. Nadia, very hard to pronounce that last name, but it talks about the wreck of the Titanic and how predictable our businesses are related to the Titanic. But the idea being here is that if he could tell me the history of the company related to S curves, when was he made that big jump? Like, here's where he hired a professional salesperson or whatever. But this guy has been really innovative through the industry, through the years. He actually is the president of the industry council, and but this is what's driven him, and so it's trying to get people back to thinking about reinventing, using that word reinvention versus budget cuts, or there's all sorts of terms used for scaling, right scaling, and all that. But the whole business is related to, you can go back to, when does that major event happen, and have the owner reflect upon that. I think that's really good way to kind of have him thinking in a very simplistic manner, to say what happened when we took those big jumps of growth. And
Yeah.
this business has been around for 30 years or so. He's a founder. He founded it was 19, so 40 now. And so, have the owner go back and reflect in time of his baby and when did it go from, from an infant to a toddler to a adolescent to an adult, and think in terms of how they don't know how to communicate in our speak, if you will, but they do know how to kind of communicate when it comes to those things that really drove the business, and how do I recreate that? How do I get that? We're all trying to get that next juice, next endorphin in the business, and usually comes through a breakthrough, whatever that breakthrough is. So you can talk to the business owner in that respect. They can tell the history and really kind of get out of them the fact that they got to do reinvention in order to grow. They got to think differently, pull some assumption out of the business model they have right now, and continue to think about that, and encouraging the staff to do that too. That's the other part of it, is that if he's the only one with coming up with big ideas, and he's also driving the truck, it becomes very tiring, and everybody watches him run around like a chicken with head cut off, and more than willing to take a paycheck. And yet, how do we drive? Not everybody's got to be the reinvention. Maybe just free him up to be more in that spot more often, right? That's kind of our theory right now, is to free him up to be more of a visionary versus being in the visionary and then the integrator and the sales. Because he's talking about meeting with the sales rep and at $32 million. I'm like, this is interesting. So time will tell, but it was going back to our original, how do we get the CPA to bring you into the critical conversations? This particular guy, we're working 2 of them right now, but this particular one is a mid-sized CPA firm. They're in they have like 5 offices down in Georgia, Dayton, Columbus, and but I've known this guy for some time. He was an investor in one of my other businesses, and so there's it's how do you parlay that kind of experience? You can't, you just have to rely on your. On the other hand, he really didn't really understand what we do in Growth Drive. I think that's even though they're in the industry, it's a very difficult concept for these CPAs to grasp a hold of. And I think Ed's right. There's some sort of visual that could somehow break through that and keep it really, really simple. Because these guys are, this is not our business, is not their business to promote, right? But they got to look for the telltale signs of people that can use the messaging. So keep it simple, I guess, is part of my message. And he actually sent me a note prior to this meeting. It says, "You guys do anything else but Growth Drive to meet with this guy?" It's like, yes, we do. And so maybe, just maybe, there's belief that it's a one size fits all. I don't know. Just
I think
over a year, and he finally got it. But my gosh, we don't have enough time in the day to do that for every one of these clients. But maybe that's the only way to do it.
But Eric, I think you asked the right question though, and that is, clarity starts to really refine an analysis of the business. And I would say 90% of the CPAs that are doing tax returns and monthly or annual financial statements for a company, they don't have any of the perspective that we get in those 24 questions because they never ask them. All they look is at numbers and data. They pretend like they know the business because they've been doing it for 3, 4, 5, 10, 15, 20 years. They don't really understand all of the ramifications and implications of function, organization, process, and systems.
Yeah. Joe, back to your comments, just thoughts for you guys, you and Ed, to think about as you're talking to them. Some of I see in my experience, I see 2 barriers to your approach that you're going to have to think about. One is that oftentimes owners are, 90+% of the time, business owners aren't strategic. They're tactical. And so they're in the moment. They're not thinking about oh, I'm going to do this great thing because look at how it's going to work in these 6 ways into the next 10 years. They just try something and it works. So, or something happens by luck or happenstance that takes them on this path and they capitalize on it. They're often better at taking something that they see directionally going pretty well and then jumping on it and pouring gas on that fire and really getting it going. And so I just challenge you to think about, you're going to have to draw out of them what those things were, and you might even have to point out to them the decision they made. They may not understand the decision they made that next jump. They may tell you, Susie joined our organization and she came from this and she suggested this and we went down that path, and right, you may have to help them understand what the thing was. The other challenge that we run into a lot, and my guess is you'll run into it in this one, is there's a difference between a 40-year-old entrepreneur or a 20-year-old entrepreneur. You said 19 when he started, and the 60-year-old entrepreneur, and the level of risk they're willing to take and the amount that they're willing to push on the gas pedal, right? And so you may run into the fact that part of what's happening is he's not personally as interested in pushing on the gas pedal anymore, or taking the same risk, or just even thinking about it the same way. He may be a little too comfortable, just like his salespeople are a little too comfortable, and that may contribute to he may say he wants something. The question is, does he, just like the salespeople, does he really want it? Is he willing to do the work that he has to? Just some thoughts for you to consider as you peel that onion, guys.
I think you hit it on the head, though, Eric, because we expect that as we go through the 24 questions, we will gain far more than a perspective of the questions, as much as the discussion surrounding the question. And I'll say every time I go through it, the 24 questions turn out to be 120 questions, because when they.
And I was going to say the same thing. We can't look at the 24 questions as the thing that answers all our problems. No. The 24 questions are conversation starters, right?
That's it.
They're the points that get us to start unpacking, right? Start peeling the onion. And as we do more and more of them, that takes us to where we want to go, right?
Oh, exactly. And I think that's one of the things that I know, because I'm familiar with the industry that he's involved with. I've known his company since day one when he started, because I was involved with a precursor of that was done by a couple of guys that had worked at ChemLawn and left and went into that business. And I've watched it grow, and they sold it off to an absentee owner who only had money to throw at things. And they proved that in 5 years, you can lose a business very effectively if you don't pay attention to it with people that care about the business.
Yeah.
They took a $20 million business down to $5 million very nicely. And it evaporated and disappeared.
Yeah.
This guy came in while they were growing in the same industry, and he went from nothing to probably 6 or 7 million while they were screwing around, and he figured out a better approach.
Yeah.
Nothing more than that. But the person that was running the other business ran it from a desk, not from face to face with the people. And so he liked, if you will, B2B sales. This guy said, I'll take B2B, but I want some B2C because I get a whole lot more margin when I get that C customer, because that helps so much more.
Yeah.
And yet when we asked the question yesterday about the mix, he thinks he's got about 60% B2B and 30% B2C, but he's not sure because he doesn't know the answer to the question.
Yeah, he doesn't try.
He's got a new controller, that a young graduate from Ohio State that happens to be his son-in-law. So he's got a vested interest in making sure he gets in to know. But the accountant is trying to give him direction on what he needs to look and see at. So the CPA firm is giving him guidance, but the CPA firm doesn't even know what the KPIs are in that industry.
Yeah.
They're just learning and growing too.
They don't know how to run the business in most cases. What they know is how to make the debits equal the credits and how
Absolutely.
to make sure
Right
that
on.
the financial statements are tied out and really pretty. Hey, I'm really curious in going back to Tim's question to unpack, because I think while we could talk about your client, that's interesting, but I think it's relevant to all of us. How do we get COIs to refer us, right? So I'm curious from your guys' perspective, Ed, you have a more technical background and more financially related background. I know that when I work with CPAs, they often think they can do what I do, right? Right? How did you overcome that? Obviously, Joe has a different background, so the two of you going together at it, and you have the industry knowledge, but can you give us some insights on what do you think got you over the top with, you mentioned the industry data that helped you pick apart the performance of the business. What do you think got you over the top? What got you to the point where the CPA said, we don't think we can do what you do. We need you to introduce you, right? Does the question make sense?
Oh yeah, I understand that one, Eric. I'll give you my point and let Joe then give you his perspective, because we both, as you said, think differently about that. I think the biggest thing is that he realized that although I do business valuation, my business acumen is far bigger. I mean, when you've got almost 50 years of experience, you look at a company and you see things because you're looking at the whole business. You're not looking at the specifics of a narrow item, what is unique in that particular industry. Instead, you look at how are they operating as an entirety. So I look at it, and most of my discussions have always been on from a top-down outside looking at the business. How is it operating, and what are the little bonfires that exist around the business that are causing it to slip and slide? Joe, how would you say your perspective there?
Net new business. Got to be about net new business. Can't be about you wanting to be introduced to their clients. It's how can we help them fish? We're basically fishing the same watering hole, and we're seeing the same fish. They're very identifiable at this level. They've been around. The company's been around for 10 years or so. Might be a fast track, but primarily these are well-known companies, and the individuals are known who we're trying to fish for. I think the conversation around net new, it's not around getting introduced to. You'll get around to that based on them knowing more about what you do through the process of doing a kind of a co-marketing effort, or make a couple sales calls together, and then virtually you're guilty by association. What I mean by that is, like, you're getting credibility, and these firms are fairly large, being the accounting firms. People know them. They're a known entity. They're not quite ready. They're trying to, like the bankers, are trying to set up a secondary CPA relationship with a company. So we're working on a list of 100 that have been targeted with different CPA firm. And I introduced them to a network partner of mine that does insurance. And last night over bourbon and cigars, we were talking with the CPA marketing sales guy and my client, who's an insurance carrier. They were talking about various known, manufacturers in the community, and who do you know, what do you know about them? So if he can introduce them to an ancillary network partner that's all about trying to remove the drama to what can they do for you versus what you can do for them as far as connecting in the community. And that's really beneficial in my book. Is we're bringing something to the table, and we're helping them acquire their next customer. At the same time, by the way, they're going to get to know more about you do, and in turn think back on some of their existing clients.
Well, one thing,
credibility together,
Well, and also, Joe, one thing I've noticed I've had 3 conversations the last couple of weeks, one with a financial planning firm and 2 CPA firms. that they have actually brought someone in-house, to do a lot of what we're doing. So, you may want to, I am very careful with the information that I provide some of these COIs at first, because I don't want to just give them all this information away for them to take it in-house and start using this.
Yeah.
So, just I say that out of protecting your time and the information that has been given.
Yep. Yeah, Joe, I didn't appreciate, maybe I missed it at the start of the conversation because I did come in a couple minutes late. I didn't appreciate that they weren't the CPA's customer. I thought you met the CPA and the CPA was introducing you to their customer, but you're both trying to get in. You said secondary relationship. They're trying to be the backup. And that's an interesting way to go. I like that, actually, the net new business approach. It's helpful because it's not just you going with your handout saying, hey, introduce me to your clients. I think there is a value there where you can help their clients and that helps them. They're going to get more. I've said 100 times, any CPA firm that introduces me to a client, I'm going to give them more business from that client. I'm going to find things that the CPA firm needs to fix for that client. I'm going to give them that new business, but it's going to be on their client. But I like your approach of we go to the market together and find a new client that we both get, right?
Yeah, in one or the other. But what was articulated the other day by one of the CPA firms saying that, and I asked the question, why do people choose you? Why do people move? And usually it's Ed, do you remember Doug's comment? It's like, one is that there's a change in the actual controller at that position, CFO. Yeah. But mostly there's just some disruption that occurs that they want to move to another level of accounting. So they're moving from the local guy who has maybe a couple hundred clients and does the tax work to a professionally managed service provider that could elevate them. And typically it's centered around trying to find money and getting their books in order. And they realize that in order to do that, it's beyond tax returns. So in that process, could we play that activator role, kind of getting that owner to think differently about not only their business, but also the service providers that they currently have. And, you've seen it before by asking the right questions. Go back to your CPA and ask them that same question. Usually it allows them to kind of, step up the expectations of the relationship. And if it's not there, then, you kind of like chink away at the confidence in their current service provider. In a very professional manner, I guess. You're not browbeating them or naysaying them. They're just saying, hey, you need to have an extra level of service in through your CPA. And really, you think about it like the referral, and going back to
Bless you.
Going back to our borrow your car, right? It's like, how can you position yourself as that referral partner that's going to get business because you're asking the right questions for the CPA firm? If you play it in that world, it's just a co-marketing space, and you're helping each other out. But I do agree there has to be a certain level of trust. But Chad, I would challenge you the fact that you got to give the nuggets. You just got to deliver the nuggets, and I don't really care if they're going to do it themselves. They're going to do it themselves. There's no change in that perspective, right? That's a cultural. That's a bred-in thing. And if the sooner you know that they're going to do that, then the sooner you move on with your life. But I'm for giving it away. They could find the internet. I don't think knowledge is the key anymore. I think the innovation and really driving. I just don't know that we have anything secret that can't be replicated.
I agree with that 100%. I was looking at it. I'm speaking from experience, and I was talking more about your time invested rather than information.
Yeah.
Because I've done it. Trust me, I've done it. And I've given away much more time than I billed for. I promise you that.
Yeah.
And I've done it, and I know it's very frustrating, and you've got to be able to cut it off at some point. And the other point I was trying to make is just the fact that other CPA firms are bringing in-house people in, right? So yes, even though you do want to be talking to that CPA, but you may want to ask that question, hey, do you have anybody else in your firm that gets involved in any of this space? And maybe have a conversation with them as well. I'm just speaking from experience.
Yeah.
They'd
Go
love to
ahead,
network with you because they have a limited set of what they're selling, right? I mean, they don't have the cadre of things that we're selling. So yes, they may be in-house. The good news, they're in the house. That's one firm. They've moved from being a CPA firm to calling themselves advisors now. So that whole advisory trend is huge. They're seeing big upticks of that. And it's very, very complimentary, guys, this to service-wise. And actually, if you almost just thinking out loud here, just off the cuff, but if you were to target those firms that have planted that flag and said, we're going to be an advisory service firm model, they're more apt to listen to you because now they understand they're given the edict to go out and find those clients we can be a fuller service prospect to or service provider to. And they're innately open-minded to this co-marketing because they're sort of flat. They're usually one or two people in a firm of size of 200, and their task is to go find this and redefine themselves as an advisory service in the community versus just a CPA. And that's a hard task to do. So how can we help them do that? We're actually, Ed and I both are going to do late May. We're going to do 2 presentations at each of the different firms on the growth drive. And we're introducing net new clients. And I bet there'll be a couple existing clients attend that because I already talked to a couple of the guys and say, how about getting this guy there? Oh, that's a good idea. One of their existing clients. So I think that just by virtue of the activities, but look for those firms in your marketplace are moving to the advisory service world, and it's a very, very complimentary package. Matter of fact, it almost, I mean, you think about it realistically, it's like you start stirring up the shit, right? You start stirring up the wanting more services. I know a firm that could deliver that. I know an advisory firm that could provide that service because you're not going to provide that stuff.
Right. So is the conversation with that CPA or that partner, hey, here's the benefits of using someone like us versus having it in-house, right? What's the ROI there? What's the benefits, right? That's just a conversation. I mean, I don't know. Hey, look, Mr. Partner, why would you go out and hire someone, pay them the salaries and all this when you've got an expert and a partner that you could outsource a lot of that to and provide more service?
I think, Chad, what you're going to find in that is in talking to the partner and things like that, they're already working 60 hours just to do what they're doing. And they cannot spread themselves any thinner, and nor do they want to add staff. And instead, it was a choice that we're choosing to work with the firms that are not accounting firms that are not doing over 100 million.
Oh, yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah.
40 to 60 million range very comfortably, maybe a slightly bigger than that. But when we talk to those larger firms, I'll just mention one, Blue & Company. The managing partner and I golf at least 20 times a year together. And he said, well, our business valuation people can do that. I talked to the business valuation chair in another city, and he says, we don't have time for any of that stuff. We don't know what's going on. He says, we can't cover it and handle our own valuation work. We don't.
And I think this is a key point. I think at the very high level, they believe they're doing what we're doing, which is giving advice and doing basic valuation things and basic things, right? With the COIs, we have to peel the onion and show them the differentiation
Right.
of what we're doing versus what they're doing. And that's where the value comes in the COIs. And some of them are going to get it. Some of the larger CPA firms and other firms aren't going to get it because they're going to be tied up and busy in, Chad, they're adding M&A resources too, not just advisory resources, but some of the decent sized firms are adding transactional resources too. I talked to a very, very large, one of the largest financial advisory firms. They have an M&A division, they have an ESOP division, they have all these things, but they don't really have anybody who prepares the businesses. They don't have consulting for it, or advisory, right? And so just like talking to our clients, we got to listen for what they're providing and then help them see that there are gaps in those. And Ed, I think that's what you and Joe are, I was listening to you guys. You're finding those gaps in their service provider list and saying, look, we can fill this. I say this all the time. You guys want to do this slice of the pie? We can do it. You guys can do it. If you win the client, you can do that part. We're fine with that. Like, we're not going to try and take that away from you, but we can do this other stuff that you can't do. And that's the add-on, right? And so we're going to have overlap, right? There's going to be overlap positions where we can both do the work, but there's going to be non-overlap areas where they do it. Like, we don't do any test work. We don't do any tax work. They're going to do that work. We do certain work that we're going to do. And then there's going to be things that we both believe that we can do.
So really talking about
Gap of workload. Yep.
what we're really talking about is filling the gap, right?
Yep.
So they got this rat through the snake problem every year. My daughter works for a CPA firm, and they had 10 people walk out the door on April 16th. 10 people because of the workload. It's a huge issue, guys. They have this snake through the rat through the snake, and the gap is, how do we help them fill the gap? So they're searching for non-tax work.
Yeah.
Right. And so how do we help them this is why they're going to the advisory service world, is that they're finding that, this is just too stressful on the organization trying to get that done.
Joe, humbly, I'll suggest they have
with their gap.
Yeah, they have a bigger problem, and that is they can't even staff the core work that they're doing, the tax and the attestation. You're right. They're trying to smooth the roller coaster by adding the advisory, but that would mean that they would have to get rid of some of their customer work, other work, because they can't even staff the regular work. There's a shortage of CPAs right now. And so the question becomes, when you're talking to them, are you really trying to get rid of some and focus on these and have more with them? Or are you really trying to, if you want to be able to swallow the whole, the whole rat and have that hump going through, then you're not going to be able to, there's going to be 3 or 4 months of the year that you're not going to be able to service your customers for this other work. How do we work together? You're right. There's different conversations there on how it works, right?
Yeah, I think you hit it right on the head, though, Eric. I mean, they're all saying they want to stabilize their employment, and one of the features of a smaller firm that's under 10 million is they take Friday off every day, every week from after April 15th. They take every Friday off until they get back until September, so that they're working only 4 days a week, and so consequently they get this gigantic flush of hours, and they accumulate the hours and then just basically run it across so they have steady compensation, and they keep and track the hours to make sure that everybody's getting paid the correct hourly rate for their people. But no matter what function you are, whether you're a support function or if one of your partners, they're tracking all of it.
And they're fighting burnout, right?
Yeah, and that's exactly the case. They're trying to avoid total burnout. And, and I ask about growth, and the neat thing is that they're still growing at 18 to 20% a year because they get people and clients, because they react and they respond to clients, because they still are out there all the time. They just don't have to come to the office on one day of the week, and they can do whatever they wish.
I'll tell you, you hang your sign out there as a CPA firm and just communicate with people and do good work. You can get as much business as you can possibly take, because there just aren't that many. There's a decline in CPA firms. There's a decline, it's all rolling up, and it's just harder to keep the people, right? So, yeah.
Well, yep, and as you say, there, even though you're getting a lot more people graduating and getting the certification, the problem is that none of them know what they're doing. They're academically sound, but they don't have good business acumen because they haven't been out there yet to do it and know enough.
Yeah.
I mean, I look at it. I mean, Teresa differentiates because she comes out of the medical industry and she's got a nursing background. Well, talking to an accounting firm that does a lot of medical work limits and shrinks opportunity. So you have to find firms that aren't specialized. I mean, I know one firm that in Columbus that specializes in dental practices. Well, I sure don't want to get that contact. I don't want to work on that contact at all, even though one of the clients of that a CPA firm has 5 dental offices. I don't really care about 5 dental offices. Now, the fact that he has 5 educational programs that are franchised and he's doing $2.5 million at each one of those locations, now I'm interested in talking to him.
Yeah.
I had a lady that was trying to work with me as she was not an accountant, but she was registered with the IRS to do the bookkeeping. And then after I say it again?
EA.
Yeah, enrolled agent.
Yes.
Yeah.
I felt like there was an I in there somewhere, but yes, EA. She's an enrolled agent when I looked her up on IRS. But then I also found out, like, on her website, and this is due diligence, right? But as you peeled back the onions, there was a lot of services there beyond the bookkeeping, but they were all outsourced, and they were outsourced through a Philippines app. They were outsourced through Fever or Fiverr. So it takes a while and it's exhausting, but all of that is where, if I'm trying to protect everything here in a VPN and everything in your system while you're in and out of systems and technology, those are all questions that they're not in the first 24, but I casually ask as we're talking about systems. Are any of your employees offshore, or are you outsourcing any of those that are not in-house, and just the mix on the staffing model? Because that also gives me quick access to know leakage and problems that I'm going to have.
It's an interesting point, Teresa. I was in a meeting the other day and somebody said, I found this new AI assistant to help me with my email. And I asked the person, is it an open system or a closed system? Right? And they didn't know the answer to that question. And I said, you better check that out. I can't just let anybody, I have M&A deals that we're working toward. There's a lot of sensitive email in all of our email systems, right? Confidential information that clients are trusting us with, and who has access to that. And all of a sudden you're teaching a large language model about all your clients' proprietary information, and it's an open system. That's not good.
A lot to think about.
Yeah, a lot to think about. Hey guys, I got to run. I got a 9:30 call. Great to talk with you. And Joe in particular, thank you for being willing to share your COI experience and your client experience. That was awesome.
Agreed. Thanks.
Okay, great guys. Thanks so much. Yep, I'm going to hop on another call too. Thanks.
All right, guys. You guys have a great week.
Thanks.
This episode is brought to you by the Growth Drive Summit. Our theme this year is building a profitable advisory business. Join us in Charleston, South Carolina, October 6th, 7th, and 8th. Expand your network, learn new skills, and generally have a good time. This is a top-rated event. We're looking forward to seeing you there. Thank you.